For centuries, humans have looked to the stars and wondered, are we alone? But some people claim they don't just wonder anymore. They say they know. They claim to have experienced direct contact with beings from beyond our world. Today, we're examining the 5 most infamous alien abduction stories in history. These aren't random tales or fleeting rumors. These are cases that changed how we think about extraterrestrial contact, cases that have been investigated by scientists, documented by researchers, and remain unexplained decades later. What makes an abduction story credible? Multiple witnesses, physical evidence, consistent testimony over time, medical documentation, and perhaps most importantly, witnesses who have nothing to gain and everything to lose by coming forward. The cases we'll explore today meet many of these criteria. From a Brazilian farmer in 1957 to American civilians in the 1960s and 70s, these stories share remarkable similarities despite occurring independently across continents and decades. These accounts have shaped popular culture's understanding of alien encounters. The descriptions of beings with large eyes, medical examinations aboard spacecraft, and missing time have become archetypal elements of abduction narratives worldwide. Whether you're a believer or a skeptic, these stories are fascinating windows into human experience, psychology, and our eternal question about what lies beyond our planet. Let's begin with the case that started it all. In October 1957, in the rural farmlands of São Francisco de Sales, Brazil, a 23-year-old farmer named Antonio Villas Boas was working his fields at night to avoid the intense daytime heat. What happened to him would become recognized as one of the earliest documented alien abduction cases in modern history. On October 14th, he and his brother witnessed a strange, bright light in the sky that seemed to respond to their presence. Then came October 15th, the night that would change everything. Boaz was plowing alone when a red light approached from the sky, resolving into an egg-shaped craft with a rotating dome. The object landed on 3 metallic legs. Terrified, he tried to drive away, but his tractor's engine died. He fled on foot but was captured by beings about 5 feet tall, wearing gray coveralls and helmets. Through the helmets, Boaz could see their small blue eyes. They communicated in what he described as animal-like barks and grunts. He was taken aboard the craft, which had a metallic interior with strange symbols on the walls. The beings removed his clothing, covered his body with a gel-like substance, and took a blood sample from his chin. He was then placed in a room that filled with a gas that made him severely nauseated. After this ordeal, another being, more human-like in appearance, entered the room. The entire experience lasted several hours. When Boaz was finally released, he was back in his field, disoriented and physically ill, with about 4 hours of time unaccounted for. In the following weeks, he suffered from nausea, weakness, and skin lesions. Fearing ridicule, he kept the experience private until 1958, when he contacted a journalist who connected him with Dr. Olavo Fontes. Dr. Fontes conducted a thorough medical exam and found that Boaz's symptoms were consistent with exposure to radiation. What makes the Villas Boas case significant is that it occurred 4 years before the famous Betty and Barney Hill case. He reported his experience before the abduction template was established in popular culture, and he recalled the entire event consciously, without hypnosis. Skeptics suggest he might have been influenced by earlier UFO stories, but Boaz, who later became a lawyer, never wavered from his account until his death in 1991. On the night of September 19, 1961, Betty and Barney Hill were driving home to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, through the White Mountains. They were an interracial couple active in their community, a detail that adds a layer of social complexity to their story. Around midnight, Betty noticed a bright light in the sky. It moved erratically, growing larger as they drove. Barney stopped the car and through binoculars saw a structured craft with figures inside. Feeling a sudden sense of danger, Barney sped away. Soon after, they heard strange beeping sounds and felt an overwhelming drowsiness. Their next conscious memory was hearing more beeps, finding themselves 35 miles further down the road with 2 hours of missing time. When they arrived home, their watches had stopped. Betty's dress was torn, and Barney's shoes were scuffed. Shiny concentric circles on their car's trunk made a compass spin wildly. Betty began having vivid nightmares of being taken aboard a spacecraft and examined by unusual beings. Both she and Barney experienced severe anxiety, and Barney developed an ulcer. In 1963, they sought help from Dr. Benjamin Simon, a Boston psychiatrist who used hypnotherapy. Over several months, in separate sessions, both recalled a similar story under hypnosis. They described being taken from their car by small, gray-skinned beings with large, dark eyes. Inside the craft, they were separated and subjected to medical procedures. Betty recalled being shown a star map, which she later drew from memory. Some researchers have suggested it points to the Zeta Reticuli star system. Barney's recollections were filled with terror, particularly his memory of the being's piercing eyes. Dr. Simon remained skeptical, suggesting Betty's dreams may have influenced Barney. In 1966, the book The Interrupted Journey made their story a phenomenon, establishing the classic abduction narrative that persists to this day. Barney passed away in 1969, but Betty spoke about their experience until her death in 2004, leaving a legacy that remains one of the most debated and influential in UFO lore. On November 5, 1975, in the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest, 7 loggers reported an event that would become one of history's most documented and controversial alleged encounters. Travis Walton, just 22 years old, was part of this hard-working crew, men not known for seeking attention. As they were driving home after a long day, a brilliant light glowed through the trees. Drawing closer, they saw a disc-shaped object hovering about 20 feet above the ground, emitting a strange amber light. Ignoring his co-workers' warnings, Travis Walton leaped from the truck and ran toward the object. The other 6 men watched in shock. According to their testimony, a beam of bluish-green light then shot out from the craft, enveloping Travis. They reported that the beam seemed to lift him and throw him backward. Terrified, the crew panicked and sped away. After a short distance, they stopped. Following about 15 minutes of frantic debate, they knew they had to go back. When they returned to the clearing, both Travis and the craft were gone. The crew drove straight to the local sheriff's office to report what happened. Their story was bizarre, and authorities initially suspected foul play. A massive search operation was launched, involving dogs, helicopters, and dozens of people. Despite the intensive effort, no trace of Travis Walton was found. As the days passed, suspicion grew that the logging crew was responsible for Travis's disappearance, inventing the story as a cover. To clear their names, 5 of the crew members agreed to take polygraph tests. The results reportedly showed that the men were being truthful about witnessing the strange object and the beam of light. Then, on November 10th, 5 days after he vanished, Travis Walton suddenly reappeared. He called his sister from a phone booth in Heber, Arizona, confused and disoriented, believing only a few hours had passed. When his family found him, he was dehydrated and had lost weight. Once he recovered, Travis began to recount his experience. He described waking up inside a brightly lit, sterile-looking room where he saw 3 beings. He described them as short, with large heads and huge, dark eyes. Startled, he reacted defensively, and the beings retreated. Weak and confused, Travis described stumbling out of the room, down a corridor, and into a larger, hangar-like space, where he saw what he believed was the same craft from the forest. Soon after, he reported encountering different beings who appeared more human-like. They didn't speak but physically guided him to another room and placed him in a chair. He reported that one of them placed an object, like a breathing mask, over his face, and he lost consciousness. The next thing he remembered was waking up on the highway outside Heber, watching a disc-shaped object ascend silently into the night sky. He then made his way to the gas station to call for help. In the aftermath, Travis also underwent polygraph tests, though the results have been debated. Examinations confirmed he had lost weight and was dehydrated, yet he lacked the typical signs of prolonged exposure to the elements, adding another layer to the mystery. The case attracted massive media attention, and Travis published his account in the 1978 book Fire in the Sky. To this day, he stands by his story, and the incident remains one of the few accounts of its kind with multiple witnesses to the initial event. In August 1976, another multi-witness case unfolded in the remote Allagash Wilderness Waterway in northern Maine. 4 friends, Jack and Jim Weiner, Chuck Rack and Charlie Foltz, were on a camping and fishing trip. All 4 were art students and experienced outdoorsmen. On the night of August 20th, the group decided to go night fishing on Eagle Lake. They built a large bonfire on the shore to act as a beacon. As they paddled out, Chuck Rack noticed a bright light in the sky approaching them. Curious, he signaled toward it with his flashlight. The object's response was immediate and unnerving. It began moving directly toward their canoe. The men realized they needed to get back to shore and began paddling frantically. A beam of light then shot out from the craft, moving toward them and engulfing the canoe in a brilliant glow. According to their accounts, this is where their conscious memory of the event ended. The next thing they knew, they were standing on the shore near their campsite. The experience felt like it had only taken minutes. But when they looked at their campfire, the large fire they had built to last for hours had burned down to nothing but glowing embers, suggesting a significant amount of time had passed. Confused and unsettled, they went to sleep. Years later, Jim Weiner began experiencing troubling nightmares involving strange beings and unclear medical procedures, all connected to that night on the lake. This prompted him to contact UFO researcher Raymond Fowler, who suggested bringing all 4 men together for an investigation. In 1988, 12 years after the incident, Fowler arranged for them to undergo regressive hypnosis, conducted separately. The accounts that emerged were startlingly similar. Under hypnosis, all 4 men described being lifted from their canoe by the beam of light and taken aboard a craft. They found themselves in a bright, clean room where they were placed on tables and subjected to various procedures by beings they described as small, with large heads and prominent dark eyes. All 4 men reported feeling helpless and frightened during the experience. Afterward, they described being returned to their canoe, with their next memory being on the shore. The consistency across 4 independent accounts was remarkable. The men also agreed to polygraph examinations, which reportedly suggested they genuinely believed what they were reporting. In recent years, one of the 4, Chuck Rack, has expressed doubts, suggesting the abduction memories may have been influenced by the hypnosis. However, the other three continued to maintain their accounts, leaving the Allagash case as one of the most compelling multiple witness accounts in UFO lore. On the evening of October 11, 1973, two co-workers, Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker, decided to go fishing after a long day at work. They chose a quiet spot on an old shipyard pier along the Pascagoula River in Mississippi. Charles was 42 years old, a foreman, while Calvin was just 19, working as a welder. They were ordinary working men, not interested in science fiction or UFOs, just hoping to catch some fish and unwind. They arrived at the abandoned Schopeter Shipyard Pier around 7 p.m. The area was isolated, and as the sun set, it seemed like the perfect, peaceful evening for fishing. But around 9 p.m., their quiet night was interrupted. Both men noticed strange blue lights reflecting off the river's surface. Calvin's first thought was that it might be a police car, but when they looked up, they saw something that defied all explanation. Hovering just above the ground, about 30 to 40 feet away, was an oval-shaped craft. It was roughly 8 to 10 feet long, made of a smooth metallic material, and emitted a bluish haze along with a strange buzzing sound. The men were frozen in place, trying to comprehend the impossible sight before them. Before they could even think to run, an opening appeared in the side of the object, and what came out would change their lives forever. Three creatures floated out of the craft and moved directly toward them. Charles and Calvin described the beings as humanoid, but clearly not human. They stood about 5 feet tall, with pale, wrinkled gray skin, almost like an elephant's hide. Their faces were the most terrifying part. Where eyes and ears should have been, they had carrot-like cones. Their mouths were just slits, and they had only small openings for noses. Most unsettling of all, they didn't walk. They glided above the ground, approaching with a steady, unnerving purpose. The sheer terror of the moment caused Calvin Parker to faint. Charles Hickson, though paralyzed with fear, remained conscious. He felt completely helpless, his body refusing to move even as his mind raced. He described the total paralysis that left him immobile but fully aware of what was happening. The beings then took hold of both men. Charles felt himself being lifted and floated toward the craft, with Calvin being brought along as well. Inside, Charles found himself in a brightly lit, sterile room. The interior was seamless, with no visible signs of construction. The light seemed to come from the walls themselves. He was suspended in the air in the center of the room, still paralyzed but conscious. An object that looked like a large, floating eye scanned his entire body. During this examination, Charles was overcome with fear, believing he was about to die with no way to stop it. He briefly saw Calvin, who seemed to be either unconscious or in a similar state of paralysis. Then, as suddenly as it began, the examination was over. The beings moved Charles back toward the opening and floated him gently down to the pier. Calvin was returned a moment later, dazed and just beginning to regain consciousness. The craft sealed itself, its blue lights intensified, and it shot up into the night sky, disappearing in an instant. The entire encounter lasted about 20 minutes. Charles rushed to check on Calvin. Both men were in a state of profound shock and confusion. Charles worried that no one would believe them, that they'd be dismissed as crazy. But he also felt a responsibility to report what had happened in case it posed a threat. After a tense discussion, they drove to the Pascagoula Sheriff's Department. Sheriff Fred Diamond and Captain Glenn Ryder listened to their story with initial skepticism. The account was simply too bizarre. However, the men's genuine terror was undeniable. To test their sincerity, Captain Ryder left them alone in a room with a hidden tape recorder. He figured if it was a hoax, they'd drop the act. Instead, the recording captured a conversation between two deeply traumatized men. Charles's voice trembled as he said, "I've been through enough of hell on this earth, and now I've got to go through something like this." Calvin's reply was just as heartbreaking. "I just want to cry right now. What's so damn bad about it is nobody's going to believe us." This tape convinced the officers that the men were telling the truth as they knew it. The sheriff's department contacted Keesler Air Force Base, but the Air Force concluded the incident was not a threat to national security and dropped the matter. However, the story leaked to the media, and Pascagoula became the center of a national media frenzy. Dr. J. Allen Hynek, a respected astronomer who consulted for the Air Force, investigated the case. After interviewing both men, he publicly stated his belief that something truly extraordinary had happened to them. Both men passed polygraph tests and psychological evaluations, which found no signs of deception or mental illness, only genuine trauma. Charles Hickson spent the rest of his life speaking publicly about the encounter, maintaining his story until his death in 2011. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the world's greatest mysteries.